Hope TV is now available on GoTV Channel 103, Zuku Channel 873, Signet Channel 817 and Star Times Channel 026. Enjoy our uplifting content and family-friendly programming anytime. Hope TV, you look and live.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Like we say on this show, it all depends from where you're watching us from. That is the time zone. This is The Leader, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. Karibu sana. Today we have a very topical issue. We have the relevant guests, Cyprian Nyamamu. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Wow.
Yes.
Who is Cyprian Nyamamu before we start diving into the topic?
Thank you very much. My identity is that I am a born-again Christian. I am a professional in the area of policy and governance and leadership, not just in Kenya, but in the African region. I am the executive director of the Future of Kenya Foundation, which is a policy and governance think tank based here in Nairobi. And we serve the nation and we serve God as a ministry.
Excellent. Why Future of Kenya Foundation? And I'm just curious whether that future is here with us.
The Future of Kenya Foundation, when we established the foundation 8 years ago, it is because we realized that any country that has made progress has a certain foundation, commission, institute which concerns itself with looking at the future of that country and then working things backwards. And we looked in the country, there wasn't any. We established the foundation. So what we do with the religious bodies, government ministries, etc., is to talk about scenarios of the future and then work things backwards. And as you would imagine, there are very major concerns as regards Kenya. The foundations are not right.
Wow. But is that future with us in the present? And when 8 years back, when you looked in the crystal ball and saw the need to found the Future of Kenya Foundation, is that the Kenya you hoped that would be in today?
In fact, we call that Kenya the Kenya Tuitakayo.
Tuitakayo, yes.
And the Kenya Tuitakayo is in the first stanza of the national anthem. The national anthem, and it has 5 main aspirations. The national anthem says, "Justice be our shield and defender." The future we projected, the Kenya Tuitakayo, is where justice is the shield and defender of the people of Kenya. And you go to practically every sector, every people group, and justice is not a reality, is not a lived reality for most Kenyans. Then there's the second aspiration of unity and cohesion and solidarity. The country is frail in terms of its fabric and solidarity. Then number 3 is about peace. Now, if you talk about peace on the surface of it, then what we saw last year in terms of a country going for an election and for the first time coming out of it, relatively peaceful. And the church played a major role in delivering that kind of a country. But now we are realizing that, in fact, it was negative peace. It is not a peace that is just peace. You can see the grievances, the pain in families. So peace is not a lived reality in this country to the majority of the people. the street protests and everything is anything to go by. Then the fourth aspiration that is in our constitution, in our anthem, in the first stanza, is that liberty and freedom shall then be a realized aspiration amongst the people of Kenya. Let me tell you that freedom is only available to those who have means. But majority of Kenyans do not have the choice, do not have the liberty to express themselves, to choose what they can be able to do. But we thank God because the freedom to worship in this country is still a tenet, is a value, is a principle that has been cherished and secured over a long period of time. So that's something that we have to thank God for. Because we have friends who are missionaries in countries where you cannot even identify yourself as a Christian. And then finally is about prosperity. Plenty be found within our borders. Now, our country is going through major turmoil because people cannot be able to access the goods of life. Basics like food, like housing, like water, like education for their children. The universities are in a very difficult place right now. So when you look at that vision of the Kenya Tuitakayo based on our national anthem, we have a lot of work to do. And it is the reason I think this topic that we are discussing today is very, very significant, because everything that is in that stanza of the national anthem is only achieved if there is leadership and if there is transformational or transformative leadership, which is service-centered, people-centered, leadership, which we do not have in our country in good measure. And that is the weakest link for our nation, that we do not have a leadership that is selfless, that is people-centered, that is service, is a leadership of service, and that is committed to transformation. We have a very transactional leadership, which I actually call dealership.
Not leadership, but more of dealership.
We have dealers.
Yes.
Everywhere you go to in this country, you only meet dealers.
It's about deals.
It's
Left,
about
right,
deals. Deals in the church, deals in every space, even in professional associations, in workplaces. People are cutting deals to see what they can take away from the employer, and practically everything. Is even our national examinations. That's why corruption has become, we are flooded with corruption, and it has also almost become a national ethos, which is against the will of God of our country. And that is why I think that we need to go back to where Nehemiah was when he was talking about rebuilding the walls. Because that is, for me, how to understand the mandate of leadership in this country, that we need to rebuild the walls. The broken walls of this nation is why floods are coming in, thieves are coming in, every criminal is coming in and destroying the country. We need to rebuild the walls. And I have singled out 3 demonic altars that have been raised in this country, which are going to destroy us if we believers do not rise up and bequeath this country a leadership that actually stands and destroys those altars. The altars are 3. The first altar that has become the stronghold, which is how our walls are broken, is what I've come to call tribalism. Then the second altar is corruption. But there's a third, which is very subtle, and a lot of people don't talk about it. It's the altar of idolatry. We have raised individuals in this country that we worship. We've raised things in this country that we worship. Internet, and the Internet of Things, and the floodgates that it has opened to this country. All these things that you see, we are talking about LGBTQ and all that, have all come in using that altar of idolatry. We have allowed our children from when they are very young to start worshiping these things of, oh, I need to go for the movies. Oh, I need to be with my friends in these parties. Oh, there is a festival. Oh, there is all. That is where the recruitment is happening. These things have been raised to a level where our children would rather not go to church,
but go
to the festivals. Oh,
yeah.
you know, and these things are normally on Sundays. Oh, samosa festival. I don't know, these are the festival and another festival, blanket and wines and all those kinds of things. These are altars of idolatry where musicians are worshipped, artists are worshipped instead of worshiping God. So these are altars that have been raised in our country. Those three, as I've spoken about them. And I don't have sufficient time to talk about the demonic altar of tribalism, which has even has overcome Christians, believers. Somebody will say that, I'm a born-again Christian, but 2 minutes later they say, these Luos, these Kikuyus, these people, these ones. And the depth of the myths that we operate, the stereotypes that Christians operate on, the way we discriminate each other, sometimes very subtly, but we have come to the place where we talk about this group of people. And then the altar of corruption, which I think in 2018, the Aga Khan University, conducted a study amongst young people, and 59% of the youth who took that interview actually said that they don't have a problem with corruption.
So it was okay to them?
So long as they are not caught.
So the challenge is not to be caught, not in the act. They didn't have a problem with it.
There's no problem in corruption.
Wow.
It's just that they should not be caught because it can, inconvenience.
And coming from a profile of the society that is the youth.
Yes.
And this country is largely 2/3, almost 3/4 youthful. It spells doom.
It spells doom. And that's what I've been raising with our bishops, our reverends and our priests. I've been telling them that we need to pray that God may give us the grace to understand what is needed, like the sons of Ishaka, how to understand the times that we are living in. The way I look at a lot of our clergy and even leaders in the church is that people don't seem to understand what we should be doing right now. What we should be doing right now is to talk about where are our young people, because they're not coming to church. They're not coming to church. There's a study that was conducted which told us that it's only 16% of the youth in Nairobi that go to church on Sundays.
So you wonder, where are they going? What's consuming their time?
Because Sunday mornings is when they're
recovering from the exploits of Saturday.
Yes, exactly. So, and then you see us talking about how we are doing exploits in the kingdom. And I say, which exploits are we talking about? Which exploit? We need to, like Nehemiah, go back to the rebuilding of the walls of this country. And the church is where we have to start from.
There's a sense of blame game whenever you have transitions, and I mean, I know you're vocal even in that space. And we always keep asking the question, when did the rain start beating us? When did the rain start? I mean, the rain has, drip, 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 and then it increases. I mean, like subtly you say, it creeps in before you know it, you're consumed. And even if we accept that, how far back do we look in the rearview mirror. But again, when you look back and you appreciate and acknowledge that we have issues, starting point is accepting that you have an issue or issues. That's a starting point. But where is the place of restitution, and how do you equalize, and how do we move forward? And who takes responsibility? Who champions it?
That's a very, very important question, my brother, because that we don't have time to look back too far. In the space that I work in of governance, we do a lot of political economy studies. And one of the topics that I've been speaking about lately is about the blame games that I see. You know, we are blaming this individual, we are blaming this individual, and we have actually missed the very foundation of where the problem is. Kenya was founded as a company, as the Imperial British East Africa Company,
Yes, history. I recall that history.
And if I can use 1 minute to cover that period of 120 years.
Please do.
What happened is that then the company was given a charter, and they took that charter back to the British, the king, and the king then entered these agreements, made this Kenya a protectorate, and then a colony, and all that kind of detail until we got our flag independence. We need to tell our young people that we actually got flag independence because everything else remained in the hands of the British. So we don't talk about these things. In the Bible, one of the things that is very valuable to the story of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, of Jacob's sons, is their land.
Yes.
Did we get back our land as the people of Kenya?
So do we really own our land?
Do we own our minerals? Do we own our resources? Because if we do not talk about these things, we will not even know who we are.
So we might be wananchi, but kuna wenye nchi.
Kuna wenye nchi who are still in this country. And,
the owners.
And those owners of this country are part of a system which wants to ensure that Kenya continues to be dependent on other countries. Economically, culturally, politically. That is why everything we are is really what the British told us to do. Even how we dress, even what we speak. So did we really become independent? So I don't want to spend time to look into that history. I just wanted to make that point so that everybody is clear that there is an unfinished discussion that we need to have. However, the rain really started to beat us when we missed our leadership. Because if you do not have a leadership, the book of Nehemiah tells us that Nehemiah, in the rebuilding of the wall, they had to, on one hand, have the shovel building, but having the sword also to guard off.
Kujipanga.
Because they were going to be attacked.
Yes.
And
stay woke.
And there are a lot of those people, the Sanballats, and who do not want the rebuilding to happen. So we have to be aware that these people are there. However, if you do not have a leadership that is courageous enough to deal with those two challenges, one of securing the process and the doing of the process, the rebuilding of the wall, but also the securing of the process. So in our country, that is exactly what is missing, leadership. So that the people who get into offices, and I'm not just talking about political office, but the people in the private sector, the people in the religious sector, the people who are in the family space, education, all the mountains of influence, add to it the professions and labor. Then you are talking about 8 pillars of society across. Whether it's in the media space, in the arts and entertainment and sports, are there values that bind us?
Are we value-based?
Are we value-based in our sports, in our media, in our education, in our services? healthcare, whatever it is, in our businesses, in the private sector, in government and governance, at all levels. What about our families? So what I have studied over these last many years, I have realized that there is no space in any of the 8 that is value-based, that is value-driven. Even in the church space. A lot of the transactions that are going on within the church space are founded on corruption, on deceit, on manipulation, on exploitation, on a lot of very negative things. And those 3 demonic altars that I said are also in the church space. They are in the school and education space, in our private sector, in our public sector. So as a country, we need to conduct this audit, because unless we fix the base of leadership, then we cannot fix this country, because we cannot rebuild.
Well, that's foundational.
It's very foundational. We will not rebuild, and we will not secure the process. Because as Nehemiah shows us, we have to do those 2 things concurrently. You can't say, we want to secure the process first, then we come to rebuild. No, we have to rebuild as we secure the process. So how do we secure the process? We secure the process through educating our children in terms of what the values are. It is about modeling the values. It's about enforcing the values.
And this education, if I may,
in terms of rewarding those values.
And even this education, as it were, is not necessarily limited to or suggesting that it is somebody else's business, formal education, because then, I mean, you and I are parents and others where we say, tumepeleka watoto shule, let me go and hustle or look for the money, you do your part. Everybody is involved, formal, informal, living it.
Education, the most important one is the informal one.
Yes.
Not the formal. The formal is important, but the most important one is the informal. Because there's something Americans call the dinner table conversations. That is where nations are built or destroyed. The dinner table. So what do parents discuss with their children at the dinner table? Do we even have a culture of dinner table discussions?
In the first place.
In the first place.
To create the opportunity.
Do you know what the colonial education system has done? It has ensured that our children can only do homework when they get home. So the education system in this country has stolen our children. So the moment children walk in, they are preoccupied about, I have to finish the homework.
So then you are taken away.
By the time the parents are coming in, they are stressed out and they are trying to cover these assignments from work and everything else. A lot of families are not having dinner table conversations. And the children have to go to bed by 8:30, latest 9, so that they wake up in the morning to go to school. That is why countries like Finland have said no homework for children. No homework for children. Because who takes work home?
Surely.
We discourage it, isn't it?
So why do we then get that?
We discourage carrying work home, isn't it?
That's true.
Why do we encourage schools
to
give children homework? So this thing called getting A's and formal education has actually robbed us of our families. And we don't even know that. So these conversations have to happen and these reforms have to be conducted.
Yes.
Yes.
Interesting, and it's everybody's responsibilities.
It is.
And the community, the society, we all have.
No, we have to be specific, my brother Mudibo, because unless we list it for Kenyans, they will not see the spaces we are talking about. There are 8 spaces I've spoken about.
Yes.
In the American church, they talk about the 7 mountains of influence. I've always insisted that there's at the 8th pillar, which is rarely spoken about, which is professions and work.
Yeah.
So if we begin with professions, our professions and our work, where we spend majority of our time, then the second area is family. How are we doing in the family space? Number 3, how are we doing in the school and education space? Number 4, how are we doing when it comes to the governance and the political space? Very important. Then number 5, how are we doing in the business and in the economy, the private sectors, our businesses, and generally our enterprises as a very important space. Then there's the media and the communication space. How are we doing with our radio, our TV? What are we doing on the internet? What are we doing on our phones? What are we doing? That's a whole area which it cuts across all the rest.
Yes.
Then there is this arts and sports and culture space, which is so important. And we don't pay sufficient attention to that space. So we have to list for our people all these spaces so that people can start to evaluate which spaces am I using. You will find that you are using about 6 spaces at the same time. But how are you managing in those spaces? And we are failing practically in all the spaces that we are in. Yeah.
And now, what we see is a sense also of demystifying leadership, and not necessarily elective. And right now, I mean, in Kenya, let's be very topical. There is the whole stress of leadership, but it speaks more of the elective space. Important, and be that as it may, you find that we, the people, as you know, so ably, the first few lines of even the Constitution, is that we, the people, then find expression, and I want to cross-reference this with the negative piece that you alluded to a little earlier in our discussion, where I think, to some extent, the negative piece that we celebrate and pontificate about
has now erupted.
More of absence of war is not really peace, but things.
It's not the presence of peace.
It is steaming. But how do you find valves to release? Because then you find people say, okay, no, but this constitution of ours is telling us I can do this, it is there, it is written, I can. Because, I can become more legalese around it. And we can go on and on and on in that direction. And then be told, anyway, the constitution is there, but again, is to guide, even though it's crafted in a way that you don't just change it every other day to suit or for the convenience of the moment. How do we manage this? Because stress is there, and stress is not unique. From the Bible, days gone by, I think from the fall of man, stress started coming into this world.
Very right, from the fall of man. What we lack in Kenya, as I said, is leadership. That is why we have to go back to tell our viewers what leadership is. Because leadership is not a position. No. Leadership is a resource, is an attribute which God gives to people so that they can be able to achieve 5 C's, as we call them. When there is leadership, the first C is called clarity. There's vision in that country. The Bible says, my people perish for lack of a vision.
Yes.
So the first thing a country needs is a vision.
A shared vision.
A shared vision that is based on values.
Right.
Do we have that? We don't. Because then we do not even have a common definition of the Kenya to Itakai.
Where are we going?
Yes, where are we going?
We'll go somewhere, anywhere.
And that is what at the Future of Kenya Foundation we preoccupy ourselves with quite a bit. So that's the first C of clarity. The second one, which is as important, is the C of character. A country that has people in places of authority who do not have character is a country that does not have leadership. And the challenge we have in this country is that we have men and women in places of authority who have power and everything, but do not have character.
Or they have character, but bad character, not character that you'd want to.
In leadership, if your character is bad, then there's no character there.
At all.
Because character is what God gives us so that we can be able to perform. So it is a positive thing.
Yes.
Character is a positive thing.
Positive.
Yeah, so the
That's
characters that we have now is a situation where you have I don't want to name names, but you have a people in government who just don't have wisdom, don't know what to say, don't know when to say it, and do not know what not to say.
Importantly, true that.
Then you have people outside government who also do not know, who also lack the character of an understanding and discerning, who do not have the honesty and the integrity in performing their leadership mandates. So the country generally lacks leadership because the second one is of characters. The first one is vision. The third important aspect of leadership is what we call community and cohesion building. Leadership builds community. Leadership builds, cohesion. And then number 4 is communication. You need a leadership that communicates clearly, thus says the Lord. And if you are in government space, then a leadership which says, if that is our vision, then the way to go there is the following.
This is how.
The fifth and very important, almost the most important aspect of leadership is competence. Now, what we lack as a country is that we lack competent men and women. In Nehemiah, what we see is competence. Apart from the vision of Nehemiah, is about the capability to actually do the job. So competence is as important as the vision. So you need character, you need, clarity of where you're going and taking the people. You also need to build community and cohesion because people who are not together, who are not bonded, cannot move in the journey. The book of Amos, chapter 3 says, can two go together if they are not agreed?
You find pulling at cross purposes.
Exactly.
Surely.
And so I see His Excellency the President, who is a believer, and knows that the two cannot go together unless they are agreed. So leadership is about how do you build this community and agreement so that you go together. When you look at those 5 C's of leadership and the lack of these C's in our community is why we have this negative peace, is why we cannot dialogue, is why we are not honest, is why there's lack of integrity, there's corruption all over this place. Because when you have character, then there's no corruption. There is integrity, there's honesty, and the country is able to move forward together. So what am I saying? I am saying that the country is at a place where God has to speak to our church fathers and leaders because they have a sole and solemn responsibility to know how to reach out to the people in politics to save this country from implosion. Because politics has become the platform where those 3 demonic altars have been established. Whether we talk about tribalism, we talk about corruption, we talk about idolatry, they are all best, glorified and raised. Those altars are raised on the altar and on the platform of politics and government. So our religious leaders, especially the leaders in the church, will need to gain wisdom and disengage from the political people, because I have seen an unholy alliance almost emerging of the state and church. And you can see that the church is now being used as a platform for politics. We say we are going to this stadium in Narok to pray.
Homecoming prayers.
Homecoming prayers. Then we spend 30 minutes for sermon and 30 minutes for praise and worship.
And then
we invite all these politicians to now take 3 hours to lambast each other and attack the other side. We, the church, have become actually the place where we sow the seeds of discord and division in the Republic of Kenya. And this is unacceptable, in my view. We must tell the president, now you are in office, you know the mandate that is in your hands. We now have to go and do what God has called us to do. Do justice for the people of Kenya and deliver, rebuild the walls, deal with corruption, deal with impunity. There is poverty. Countries, foreign countries have occupied our economy. We have become a net importer. We are unable to create jobs for our children. Talk to the president and tell him, you now are in office, take over. I saw the president saying that he's going to put down the Bible. He should not put down the Bible. Let him hold the Bible like Nehemiah. He needs to secure the process using the Bible, but do the rebuilding of the walls.
And the justice aspect of it,
Yes.
and the perception of fairness, as it were, should be across board.
Must be
Not
across
selective.
board. Must be across board. When you see leaders in a country saying that, this country has shareholders and only the people who voted for government are the ones who then benefit from the fruits. And that's a country where everybody pays taxes.
I mean,
Whether they voted or
doesn't
did
matter.
not vote for you,
and that
they
was
pay
their choice
taxes.
anyway. That was their choice.
Yes, is a choice. That's why we are a democracy.
Yes.
So then, in political science, those are the things we call fascism. That's fascism. You introduce fascism to how you relate, and you tear the foundations of a country. So we must take our role as the church and not just pray, but actually counsel the leaders who are in office, whether they are in the private sector, whether they are in civil society, whether they are in the professions, whether they are in politics and government, whether they are in the security sectors. It is our responsibilities. That's why we even have chaplains. That's why we even have chaplains in the military, chaplains in the
yes.
police, chaplains in school, chaplains everywhere, because we are needed in every space in our nation. We cannot leave it for another person. So there is failed leadership. To conclude that the rain started to beat us right at independence because we did not have a leadership that has these 5 C's all together. We do not have a leadership that understands that rebuilding the walls also requires the securing of the process. All those things have to be done together. And that's why the topic today is so apt about the huge cost of leadership. If you say you are going to be the leader, whether in the family, whether in the professions, whether in politics and government, you must understand what the cost you have to pay is. Because our Lord Jesus Christ paid the ultimate price to lead us to salvation. So we cannot get anything of value without paying the cost.
And indeed, and I love that because we've got about 5 or so minutes to go. Can I suggest to ask this, no free lunch?
There isn't.
You know this thing of saying, tutapata itakuja ni bure, free, because that conditions us
Yes.
into
To switch off.
To switch off and expect to be given. To be
Exactly.
paid. Somebody must pay, including yourself, through the taxes and so on, because that is, you remove the dignity and opportunity to go on, to be part of it, by letting it be somebody else. Then you can now start demanding and say, okay, will you say my uncle will be 50 bob? In fact, I wanted a 30 bob.
Yes.
I mean, I'll be realistic.
But it is people who made promises
Without
knowing
thinking
the cost of the promise.
Yes.
And
I like that. Cost of the promise.
The cost of the promise is a cost of leadership. That is why the C of competence is in leadership. You don't just stand on platforms and say things
for the sake of just getting there.
No,
you'll be held to account.
In fact, you need to resign if you cannot deliver on things that you've made promises about. So you need competent people to tell you you cannot deliver unga at that cost because the economy doesn't allow
How
it.
can the church then use its platform, its space, where it's at, appreciating all these dynamics, play the role of holding our leaders to account across board in the family and the workplace and especially in the political space, and not wait to say, wait for your turn until 2027 then. Because what happens? Are we saying then suffer until then? How can we do it? Especially knowing that there's also access. We can be focusing on the House on the Hill. Yet, do you know, the MCA who is closest, easiest, you can be holding him or her to account everything. How can we play that part? What can the church do?
The church is most organized, the most structured, the most present across the Republic of Kenya. And there's a book that we are writing, and it's being edited, very important. We are calling it The Office of the Citizen. The Office of the Citizen.
Office of the Citizen.
What has happened is that Kenyans have vacated the office. It's vacant. The Office of the Citizen is just like the Office of the Man, which is doing very badly in this country.
And we can see the consequences.
The consequences are there. But the Office of the Citizen really is what brings this kind of people in Kenya who think that somebody who's going to be their servant has to pay them money first. That's how we exchange.
Very transactional.
That's how we sell out our country. Because immediately somebody gives you 100 shillings.
You must get it
What
back.
you have said, no.
Yeah.
What you've said is that I am not your boss.
No. Oh, that's true.
I am not your boss. My relationship with you is that I can't hold you. When church people allow politicians to come for any church I am a member of, does not allow politicians to come and fundraise. It is for that same reason. The moment a politician walks through that door and he gives you 20,000 shillings to build this church, you lose your right to hold him accountable.
Because how? Yeah.
Because the relationship changes immediately.
It changes.
The church must be aware why we are calling on the church to desist from calling politicians to do arambes in their churches. The moment they walk through the door and they give you 100,000, 200,000, $1 million shillings, and you accept it, the people seated on the pews immediately lose the authority to hold that gentleman or that lady accountable. That is where the country lost it. During Moi's days, there were no speeches in churches. Politicians never used to speak in church. Even Moi himself, he used to go outside and speak from the steps.
Not in.
Never inside the church. There are things that we have allowed in this generation which have robbed authority away from even the anointing from the clergy. And a lot of bad things are happening in this country. However, I wanted to conclude and say this, that the church has a role to play in providing the civic education that is missing in this country. To tell Kenyans that in the office of the citizen, you have your responsibilities and duties as a citizen, then you have your rights, and then you have your powers as a citizen. What has gone on with the secular civil society for the last 30 years is that the education that we have provided to citizens is that you have rights.
But missing out on the other.
Missing out on you have obligations and duties and responsibilities and powers. We only tell people about their rights. The right to. Even our children in school are being told about their rights. So we need to repair the walls of this country, and we have to start from the office of the citizen. Citizens should rise up and tell politicians that we don't want that nonsense to continue. Of where you spend 800 million to buy your spouse's cars and pay them money and set up offices for them. How do we allow those kinds of things?
And you're not employing doctors and teachers.
When we are not employing doctors, when we are not paying teachers, when we have our children who went to medical school and are unemployed, when people are dying in hospitals for lack of medicine and there's no food, and then we say that we are going to employ 50 CASs to do imaginary jobs, and we are paying former governors who are billionaires a salary. now, I mean,
Iko shida.
it is warped up. It is actually inverted priorities as a country, and that is failed leadership.
What a place to end. Yeah. Wow. Watch this space for season 2. Cyprian, thank you so much for your insights.
We thank God for the opportunity always to...
And we look forward.
Thank you.
A couple of take-homes. But again, you let out the book you're editing. When it is ready,
we'll bring it here.
Tafadhali, we'd love to unpack it.
Yes.
Because this has been The Leader. We thank you for the privilege of your time. Let's do this next week, same time. God bless.